Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together so that we can immerse ourselves both in the written text of Torah and in the unwritten text of Torah, which includes our own lives and our own reflections and understandings of this great tradition and this great wisdom. But we are in
Here's Gary Roberts.
Parshat Toldot,
There's lots of people we know.
which you can find beginning in chapter 25, verse 19.
And Kim DeSellis.
And I invite you to
And
turn
I'm
to
not
that
muted, but
in
maybe
your-
I should be.
The rabbi's muted.
if you have a copy. We'll have an
Oh, no, you just have the sound off.
together. Once
Other
again,
people hear him.
Genesis chapter 25, verse 19. And I invite everyone to go ahead and unmute yourselves so that together we can recite our expressing gratitude for this moment that we involve ourselves in with one another, share with one another. And let us say our blessing. Baruch atah
Baruch atah
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu, melech
Tanu b'mitzvotav,
Banu
v'tzivanu
haolam,
great
Torah.
Torah. Thank you, God,
Read his
opportunity
lips.
of immersing ourselves in this great body of wisdom we call Torah, the great body of wisdom of all those who are present with us, engaged in this great study. So once again, we are in
Only on mute.
chapter 25, verse 19. And if everyone could take a moment to mute themselves, and then I'll invite people to take turns to share in the reading, and allow me to share with you the very opening of Parshat Toldot, chapter 25, verse 19.
Rabbi, could we take care of some business? Are we planning to meet next Thursday night, Thanksgiving evening?
It is Thanksgiving. I think it would be a great opportunity to give thanks for being with whomever we can be with, and we'll use that will be our moment of Torah together. Okay, I think that's what's reasonable and best. Thank you very much for asking, Martin. So once again, chapter 25, verse 19. This is the story of Isaac, son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took to wife Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac pleaded with God on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And Abraham responded to his plea, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled in her womb, and she said, "If so, why do I exist?" She went to inquire of Adonai, and Adonai answered her, "Two nations are in your womb, two separate people shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first one emerged red, like a hairy mantle all over, so they named him Esau. Then his brother emerged, holding on to the heel of Esau, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. We're now at verse 27. And Richard Kramer, would you like to read a little bit?
Yes, thank you. And the lads grew up, and Esau was a man skilled in hunting, a man of the field, and Jacob was a mild man, a dweller in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And Jacob was preparing a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me gulp down some of this red stuff. I'm famished." Therefore, is his name called Edom. Says here, Edom is a play on the word Adom, which means red. And Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "Behold, I'm at the point of death. Of what use is my birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me now." And he swore to him, and he sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and he rose and he went off and thus did Esau spurn his birthright.
Thank you, Richard. And Jim and Peggy, would you like to unmute and read a little bit, beginning with the very start of chapter 26?
There was a famine in the land. Aside from the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Adonai had appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I point out to you. Reside in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all these lands to you and your heirs, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your heirs as numerous as the stars of heaven, and assign to your heirs all these lands, so that all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your heirs, inasmuch as Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my laws, and my teachings." So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say "my wife," thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. When some time had passed, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looking out of the window, saw Isaac fondling his wife Rebekah. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, "So she is your wife? Why then did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Isaac said to him, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Abimelech said, "What have you done to us? One of the people might have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us."
Abimelech then charged all the people, saying, "Anyone who molests this man or his wife shall be put to death." Isaac sowed in that land and reaped 100-fold the same year. Adonai blessed him, and the man grew richer and richer until he was very wealthy. He acquired flocks and herds and a large household, so that the Philistines envied him. And the Philistines stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham, filling them with earth. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you have become far too big for us." So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the Wadi of Gerar, where he settled. Isaac dug anew the wells which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham's death. And he gave them the same names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants digging in the wadi found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled, and Isaac's herdsmen, saying, "The water is ours." He named that well Isaac, because they contended with him. And when they dug another well, they disputed over that one also. So he named it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug yet another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now at last Adonai has granted us ample space to increase in the land."
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Peggy. And Steve, would you like to read a little bit, beginning at verse 23?
And from, okay, I'm on. And from there he went up to Beersheba. That very night the Eternal appeared to him, saying, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Have no fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and make your descendants numerous for the sake of my servant Abraham." So there he built an altar and called upon the name of the Eternal. There he pitched his tent, and there Isaac's servants dug out a well. Abimelech now went to him from Gerar with Abizad, his confidant, and Pichol, commander of his troops. Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me when you hate me and drove me away from your midst?" They replied, "We see clearly now that the Eternal has been with you. So we thought, Pray, let there be a sworn treaty between us, between you and us. We will make a compact with you. Would you ill-treat us, seeing that we never did you an injury and did only good to you and sent you away in peace? You are now the blessed of the Eternal. So he made them a covenantal feast. They ate and drank.
Thank you,
What-
Steve. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And let me ask Dave, would you like to read a little bit there? Verse 31.
Early in the morning, they exchanged oaths. Isaac then bade them farewell, and they departed from him in peace. That same day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." He named it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. When Esau was 40 years old, he took to wife Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basmath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they were a source of bitterness to Isaac and Rebekah.
Thank you. Let me ask Margot, would you like to begin reading at the start of chapter 27?
Sure. When Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older son Esau, said to him, my son, he answered, my son. He answered, "Here I am." And he said, "I am old now, and I do not know how soon I may die. Take your gear, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open and hunt me some game. Then prepare a dish for me, such as I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my innermost blessings before I die." Rebekah had been listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau had gone out into the open to hunt game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "I overheard your father speaking to your brother Esau, saying, 'Bring me some game and prepare a dish for me to eat, that I may bless you with the Lord's approval before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully as I instruct you. Go to the flock and fetch me 2 choice kids, and I will make of them a dish for your father, such as he likes. Then take it to your father to eat, in order that he may bless you before he dies." Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am smooth-skinned. If my father touches me, I shall appear to him as a trickster and bring upon myself a curse, not a blessing." But his mother said to him, Your curse, my son, be upon me. Just do as I say and go and fetch them for me. He got.
Thank you,
Okay.
Margot. I'm going to invite Gary to go ahead and read if you'd like, starting at verse
I
4.
got so involved in the story.
Got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared a dish such as his father liked. Rebekah then took the best clothes of her older brother Esau, which were there in the house, and had her younger son Jacob put them on. And she covered his hands and the hairless part of his neck with the skins of the kids. Then she put in the hands of her son Jacob the dish and the bread that she had prepared. He went to his father and said, "Father," and he said, "Yes. Which of my sons are you?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you've told me. Pray sit up and eat of my game, that you may give me your innermost blessings." Isaac and his son, "How did you succeed so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because the Lord your God granted me good fortune." Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob drew close to his father Isaac and felt him and wondered. The voice is the voice of Jacob, yet the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him. His hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, and so he blessed him.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much. Justin, would you like to read a little bit, beginning at verse 24?
And he said, "Are you indeed my son Esau?" And he said, I am. And he said, serve it to me that I may eat of the game of my son, so that my soul will bless you. And he served him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said to him, please come closer and kiss me, my son. And he came closer and he kissed him, and he smelled the fragrance of his garments. And he blessed him, and he said, behold, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of a field, which the Lord has blessed. And may the Lord give you the dew of the heavens, and of the fatness of the earth, and of the abundance of grain and wine. Nations shall serve you, and kingdoms shall bow down to you. You shall be a master over your brothers, and your mother's sons shall bow down to you. Those who curse you shall be cursed, and those who bless you shall be blessed.
Thank you so much, Justin. And let me ask Jay, would you like to read beginning at verse 30?
No sooner had Jacob left the presence of his father Isaac, after Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, that his brother Esau came back from his hunt. He too prepared a dish and brought it to his father, and he said to his father, let my father sit up and eat of his son's game, so that you may give me your innermost blessing. His father Isaac said to him, who are you? And he said, I am your son Esau, your firstborn. Isaac was seized with very violent trembling. Who was it then, he demanded, that hunted game and brought it to me? Moreover, I ate of it before you came, and I blessed him. Now he must remain blessed. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst into wild and bitter sobbing and said to his father, bless me too, father. But he answered, your brother came with guile and took away your blessing. Esau said, was he then named Jacob that he might supplant me these two times? First he took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing. And he added, have you not reserved the blessing for me? Isaac answered, saying to Esau, but I have made him master over you. I have given him all his brothers for servants and sustained him with grain and wine. What then can I still do for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, have you but one blessing, father? Bless me too, father. And Esau wept aloud, and his father Isaac answered, saying to him, see, your abode shall enjoy the fat of the earth and the dew of heaven above. Yet by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restive, you shall break his yoke from your neck.
Thank you so much, Jay. And let me ask Kim, would you like to read a little bit beginning at verse 41?
Okay. I'm reading from Everett Fox's version, just so you know the wording's a little different.
That's lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Esau, of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. Esau said in his heart, let the days of mourning for my father draw near, and then I will kill Yaakov, my brother. Rivkah was told of the words of Esau, her elder son. She sent and called for Yaakov, her younger son, and said to him, here, Esau, your brother, is consoling himself about you with the thought of killing you. And now, my son, listen to my voice. Arise and flee to Laban, my brother in Haran, and stay with him for some days until your brother's fury has turned away, until his anger turns away from you and he forgets what you did to him. Then I will send and have you taken from there. For should I be bereaved of you both in a single day? So Rivkah said to Yitzhak, I loathe my life because of those Hittite women. If Yaakov should take a wife from the Hittite women like these from the women of the land, why should I have a life?
Thank you so much.
So
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And let me ask Martine, would you like to read a little bit, the very start of chapter 28?
Thank you. Isaac then summoned Jacob and blessed him and gave him this instruction.
Do not take a wife from the daughters of from among the daughters of Canaan. Get ready, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and numerous, so that you become a host of peoples, and give you the blessing of Abraham, you along with your descendants, to possess the land in which you have sojourned, that God gave to Abraham. Thus did Isaac send Jacob away. He went to Padan Aram, to Laban the son of Bethuel, the Aramean, brother of Rebekah, mother of Jacob and Esau.
Thank you, Martin.
Keep going.
Let me invite Susan and David. Phillips, would you like to read beginning at verse 6?
When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padan Aram, there to take a wife for himself, blessing him and instructing him, do not take a wife from among the daughters of Canaan. And I just,
And Jacob had listened to his father and to his mother and had gone to Padan Aram. And Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan were bad in his father's eyes. And Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, sister of Nebaioth.
Thank you. That's quite a dramatic way to conclude our Torah portion, isn't it? These two relatives, Esau and Ishmael, getting together out of some sense of spiting the family. Fascinating. So this is our entire Torah portion for the week, our Toldot, the generations of Isaac. So I'd like to invite everyone, if you could once again mute, if everyone can mute, and then I'll just share with you a little bit of focused study on a portion of our Torah portion this week. And then I will go ahead and invite everyone to share your own responses and thoughts and what provoked you and interested you about this week's Torah portion. So on the handouts that I prepared, which is available both on the Facebook and which was mailed out to those who requested it, I spent a really long time looking for a graphic image that would somehow capture what I wanted to focus on for this week's Torah portion. And I came upon a work of art, which is actually the cover for a book of poetry by a woman named Rachel Hadas. And the name of her book of poetry is Questions in the Vestibule. And that really captured what I wanted to focus on in many ways, not just because I wanted to focus on the nature of questions, but the fact that she has entitled her book of poems Questions in the Vestibule really fascinated me, because the vestibule, of course, is that space that's in between. It's in between the outside and the inside. It's that transition point within a household. And what Rachel Hadas does in her poetry, especially in this volume, is that she explores the in-betweenness of existence, which she finds to be so rich with the indeterminacies of living, with the awareness that past and present and future are not quite as distinct as we might imagine. There is this slipping and sliding between these dimensions. And for her, this image of the liminal space that we call the vestibule is that point of easily sliding between the inside and the outside, between one room and the next, between one dimension and the next. And of course, for her as a poet and for many artists and for many writers, one of the key parallel dimensions, which it's easily to slip and slide back and forth between, is that of dreaming dimension and the waking dimension. So it fascinated me because not only are we going to look a little bit about the nature of questions, but the image of a threshold to me is what I visualized in this week's Torah portion. There's so many threshold moments, if you will, that are captured in this week's Torah portion, in which that space between one dimension and the next, or one set of time and the next, one body and the next, is so slender. We start with Jacob and Esau. These are twins. What separates them? Perhaps a mere membrane is what separates them. And one came out first, but the other was grabbing on the other's heel. The spatial time between each of their births, it seems to be very short, and there's one is attached to the other almost. And then this incident of the blessing, which we'll talk about, that Isaac gives to one of his sons. A lot of the ways in which this is often portrayed in works of art, this moment, is that Esau is actually standing in a doorway, bearing witness to his brother Jacob receiving the blessing from their father Isaac that he feels should have gone to him. And of course, the very image about Isaac being on this bed, this deathbed, is yet again another liminal space, this threshold moment between life and death, and the bed itself represents that vestibule, that space in between he's alive and he's dead. And then our Torah portion ends so dramatically with this departure of Jacob. So he crosses the threshold of his parents' home to seek something or to get away from something. And in fact, we can talk a little bit about the nature of Jacob's departure. It's not real clear. And so in fact, it's quite confusing and ambiguous in our Torah portion. Is he leaving home because he's afraid for his life? Because his mother has told him that your brother Esau wants to kill you as soon as your father Isaac is dead? Is that why he's leaving? He's fleeing for his life. He's afraid, he's terrified, and he's running as fast as he can to get away from things? Or is he leaving because his father has just told him, I want you to marry a nice girl who's not a Hittite. I want you to go to your uncle's home, Laban. You'll find a nice girl there. You'll get married. So is Jacob now leaving because he's been promised a future? He's no longer terrified. He's hopeful. He's now moving towards new life, new hope, and he's full of great expectation and wonder and joy. These are two very different scenarios under which he's leaving home. So this slipping and sliding between different dimensions, different times, different emotions is really captured, I think, so dramatically in many different ways in this week's Torah portion. The other thing that fascinated me, after I picked this graphic, mostly for its image, and then secondly, because it was a book of poetry dealing with questions and dealing about the in-betweenness of existence, I realized that this woman, Rachel Haddis, who honestly, a contemporary American poet I had never heard of before, when I researched her, Rachel Haddis is the daughter of a man named Moses Haddis.
Your relative?
So Moses Haddis was one of the primary reasons for my joy of heading to Columbia University, because Moses Haddis was the head of the classics department at Columbia, and that was going to be my major. And I was so looking forward to Moses Haddis being my teacher. And then about a month or two before I started my freshman year at Columbia, Moses Haddis died. So here is this daughter of this man whom was my primary joy for going to Columbia, and then he was gone just right before I got there. So this notion, these different points of contact. It's fascinating how I picked a graphic just for her because it looked pretty and it captured the sense of what I wanted to talk about. And lo and behold, it was a point of contact to a whole nother dimension in my own life. It was fascinating.
You were in the
I have to
vestibule
share
all
with
that time.
you a poem, excerpts of a poem by Wallace Stevens. And his poem is called Questions Are Remarks. Let me share excerpts from the poem with you. In the weed of summer comes this green sprout. Why? Peter the voyant says, Mother, what is that? The object that rises with so much rhetoric, but not for him. His question is complete because it contains his utmost statement. It is his own array, his own pageant and procession and display. If you look at the poem, you'll notice that Wallace Stevens did not insert a question mark after the words, Mother, what is that? And Wallace Stevens has already hinted that that's what's going to happen by the title of his poem, Questions Are Remarks. And so here he's playing with the notion that sometimes what appears to be a question is in fact a statement. So let's look a little bit deeper in our Torah portion, how these themes about the nature of questions and exactly what are questions and what role do questions play, how they appear in our Torah portion. And so it's at the very beginning of our Torah portion, chapter 25, verse 22, and Rebecca is pregnant and she feels this disturbance within her. And she senses that these two beings that are within her are in conflict with one another. They're in tension with one another, and it distresses her greatly. And she says, if this is the way I'm feeling, if this is what's happening, she says, Lama ze anochi, and which can be translated as, well, let's see. In my translation, it's, if so, why do I exist? Lama ze anochi. But really, literally, you can read Lama ze anochi as Lama, why, ze, this, anochi, I. Why is this an I? Why does this I exist? Why is there an I? So this is this first character. Rivka is the first character in Torah who's grappling with what we would call existential crisis. Why am I here? I'm sensing conflict. What's the purpose of living if living is about conflict? We look at the name Rivka, which gives us some fascinating information here. So the name Rivka is drawn from the Hebrew, which means, the verb would mean to tie fast. And so from that we get the noun in Hebrew, marbek, which means a stall, which is where animals are kept, or literally it would be defined as a tying place where one ties together animals within a dwelling for them. We can also look at Rivka as being an anagram. And if you change some of the letters a little bit around, instead of Rivka, you can have Kirba. And Kirba, as a noun, means an approach from the Hebrew verb karev, which means to come near, to draw near, to approach. And from this same root, we get the word korban. Korban, which is the Hebrew word for an offering, a sacrifice. And from these same letters, we also get kerev, which means an inward part. And indeed, if you look at the same verse that we've just looked at, verse 22, it says, the translation is, but the children struggled in her womb. but the word that's used for that in her womb is Bekirba, built off this same word I've been sharing with you, kirba. Bekirba, in her innards. So it's been, Bekirba, it means in her insides. So she is someone who is sensing this struggle within her innards. And from these same letters, we can get the name Rivka. Rivka is someone who's struggling with the innerness of life, if you will. And so, if you remember, we've discussed in the past midrash about Abraham as to, well, why was Abraham the one that God picked to start this new enterprise that eventually becomes Judaism? And we talked about a midrash that portrays Abraham as asking questions about the nature of the world and why does it seem to be in conflict? Why does it seem to be on fire when it is such a beautiful place and so there must be someone who made such a beautiful place. And why isn't the owner of this beautiful place taking care of putting out this fire that seems to be on the brink of destroying this beautiful creation? And it's in response to that inquiry, that curiosity, that concern about conflict in the world, that then God enters into Abraham's life and says, Lech lecha, in a sense, you're the one who's going to leave behind the way things have been and start on a path of creating a whole new enterprise. So Abraham is concerned about these external struggles, these external conflicts, and that concern is what ultimately propels him into a relationship with God. And something similar is happening here with Rebecca, on a slightly different dimension, because Rivka is concerned here not so much with the struggle that's taking place outside of her in the world at large. She's concerned about the struggle that seems to be happening inside of her, within her own personal existence, within her own subjectivity. And as the Midrash indicates happened with Abraham, the very express words of the text indicate that her concern about awareness of this conflict and wanting to figure out why is this happening is what leads her to God. Because if you notice immediately after, at the end of that verse, where it starts off, the children struggled in her womb, and she said, if so, why do I exist? She then went to inquire of God. So her struggle with the nature of existence, with her subjectivity, similarly as happened with Abraham, has the same propulsive effect. It drives her to seek out God. It doesn't cause her to become despairing. It doesn't cause her to give up. It doesn't cause her to become fatalistic. Well, that's just the way things are. It causes her to seek out meaning. And that search for meaning brings her to God. So I want to share with you a little bit about a midrash that tells us something about the importance and the nature of questions in our tradition. So we're going to look at a midrash that's dealing with a verse out of Exodus, and we'll see here three different points of view about what it is that would cause someone to embrace what we call God. Here's the midrash. Is God in our midst or not? Let me just back up. So this is, to set the setting, that's the verse from Exodus, and it is a verse from chapter 17 in the book of Exodus, where the Israelites are wandering and they have been seeking water, and Moses has just, at the instruction of God, hit a rock with his staff and water has come out. And then they are on the verge of encountering the Amalekites. And the Israelites express this. They say, is God in our midst or not? And the word that's used for in our midst is one that we've just encountered in this week's Torah portion. Birkirbenu, is God within us, amongst us, in our midst? Same word. So here's the Midrash. Is God in our midst or not? Rabbi Yehuda said, if God is master over all reality, then we will serve God. If not, we will rebel. Rabbi Nehemiah said, if God provides us with nourishment like a king who resides at the center of the state, and his people do not have to ask him continually for food, then we will serve him. If not, we will rebel. The sages said, if we harbor doubts in our hearts, and God knows how we are questioning, then we will serve God. If not, we will rebel. So here are these three answers to this question about, is God among us? Shall we serve God or not? And the first answer from Rabbi Yehuda is, well, if we can understand that this is the God who's the master over all reality, the true sovereign over everything, yes, of course, and we'll serve that one that is called God. Rabbi Nehemiah has a slightly different answer. He says, the one that we will serve is the one who provides us sustenance, the one who doesn't even have to ask us if we need food, who will always make food available for us, who sustains us. That's the one that we will serve. But the collective answer from the sages is very interesting. If we harbor doubts in our heart, and God knows how we are questioning, then we will serve God. If not, we will rebel. The sages seem to say, what we're looking for to acknowledge is a sovereign who knows our innermost struggles and who can accept them, who can handle the fact that we struggle, we have questions, we're in conflict, who has the degree of insight, and we might use the word empathy, who can see that, who can feel that, who can embrace that. That's what we're looking for, who can accept our questionings. This notion about the importance of questions, it occurred to me as I was studying for this week's portion, points up a difference in Jewish tradition between prayer and theology. Theology is, we can characterize as a systematic collection of answers to explain things. Theology doesn't really play much of a role in Jewish tradition. We don't really have a unified, coherent, systematic, singular theology. We contrast that with the nature of prayer. Prayer has always been very important to us in the rabbinic tradition. Prayer, which is the Hebrew word is tefillah, which comes from the Hebrew word palal. Palal means to intervene, to judge, to arbitrate. And so the word tefillah, prayer, is in the reflexive form of that verb, which means it's something that we're doing to ourselves. We are judging ourselves. So what one can say that theology is a framework of answers. Prayer is a framework for investigation, of questioning, of interrogation. Prayer, I want to suggest, has a greater sense of priority and preference and privilege within the Jewish tradition than theology does. Let's look at a more recent commentary from the Hasidic tradition. This is from the work Mei HaShiloach, which is a work that was created by Rabbi Mordechai Yosef of Ichpitza He lived about 1800 to about 1854. He was the founder of this Ishbitzer Hasidic dynasty. And he was very modern in a sense in his commentary. He was very concerned about personal struggles, personal motivation, personal intent, personal exploration of one's meaning and existence. So he wrote this, and it ties into this week's Torah portion. First, he begins by quoting from book of Exodus, from the moment at Sinai. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai your God. And Rabbi Mordechai Yosef writes, the word ani is not used, but rather Anochi. Had it been written ani, the meaning would have been that the Holy Blessed One had revealed God's light to Israel in all its completeness, and then they could not have reached deeply into God's word, for God would have already revealed everything. The additional letter kaf in Anochi teaches that it is not in a state of completeness, but an imagined image of the light that the Holy Blessed One would reveal in the future. So to unpack this a little bit, the word ani is the first person singular, a pronoun, I. So is the word anochi. It also is the first person singular pronoun. And what Rabbi Mordechai here seems to be saying is, at Mount Sinai, God did not use the word ani when referring to using I, but anochi. And why? Because he seems to be saying that the word ani has a sense of emphasis and clarity and completeness. Anochi is the same as ani, but what it does is it adds at the end this letter kaf. And the letter kaf in Hebrew, used by itself, means like or as. So it's an invitation to some kind of comparison, some kind of analogy, something that requires us to examine the object itself and do some kind of exploration about what are its qualities, what are its elements, what makes it a like something. So Rabbi Mordechai is saying, if at Mount Sinai, God had used the word ani, it would have explained everything. Instead, God uses the word anochi, which then provokes the Israelites to want to explore what is this, what is the likeness aspect of it? What is it that we are stimulated to want to explore and examine and delve into this some more, which is exactly what God had intended. Why is that relevant to our Torah portion this week? Because that's the word that Rivka uses. She says, Lama zeh anochi. So she ties herself into this incompleteness. She ties herself into this moment requiring examine and inquiry rather than clarity of existence and purpose. So her use of the word ties into God's use of the word at Sinai, which was meant to provoke exploration, examination, inquiry, and questioning. Now I want to share the last couple here of comments, and then I'll invite everyone to share your insights. This number 7 that's on the sheet is from a very different tradition, but it says something that we've already encountered in our own tradition. This is from Taigen Dan Layton, who is a Soto Zen priest. He is someone who is actually an authorized Zen teacher in the tradition of Sunryu Suzuki. And I believe he currently lives in Chicago. And in one of his works, he wrote this: "We do not need an answer to our question. To be present in the middle of the question is itself complete. Here's the way that questions drive Jewish tradition and are at the very heart of what this tradition is all about. Torah itself is not a book of answers. It's a book of questions. It begins with a sense of questions for us, as we've talked about before. What does the word Bereshit mean? And then it ends, all of the Bible ends with a question, in this case coming from a Persian king who's basically asking the question, do you want to leave exile and rebuild your temple, or do you want to stay here in exile? And the Talmud itself, this great 63-volume work that took hundreds of years for rabbis to complete, the Talmud is propelled forward by a series of questions. And it is a training manual, if you will, for all of us on how to view questions, not as a threat to stability and order, but as that which actually sustains and strengthens community. The questions nourish and sustain and strengthen the community that the rabbis over hundreds of years have been charged with holding together while in the diaspora. It's not the answers so much that hold them together, although there are some answers. It is the dialogue of questions is what frames and keeps the community together. And indeed, not every question in the Talmud gets answered, but every conversation in the Talmud is engined by a question. Let's conclude with this. In Hebrew, the word question is she'elah. It's 4 letters, Shin, Aleph, Lamed, He, 4 letters. The middle 2 letters, Aleph and Lamed, El, one of the words for God. In the very middle of a question is God. And that's where we are encouraged to go. So with that, let me invite others to share what provoked you, what interested you, what made you wonder during our course of our reading together. So I'll begin with Susan. If you unmute and then share with us.
So this is a comment. I was just struck with the fact that Noah didn't question.
Yes. Yes. We can view these opening chapters in Torah as God's search for someone who's going to be worthy to carry on this grand enterprise. And poor characters, Adam and Eve, don't measure up, and Noah doesn't measure up. And then finally we get to Abraham, who measures up primarily because he is not satisfied with the way things are and wonders about it and is willing to engage even with the creator of everything and challenge the creator of everything about the way things are. So thank you about that. Yeah. Others? Richard.
2 things. One is that all these older sons who are warriors, Cain, Ishmael, and Esau, are all cast out. And it's the mothers again. It's Sarah and it's Rebecca who engage in this duplicity to have the younger sons who are more peaceful go to Abraham's brother's wives to get their wives. That's where our lineage comes from. And that Abraham, he liked the gaminess, he liked the rough and tumble, and that here we are on earth with these tensions, and we face it now in our election, in the world, constantly. And how do we resolve that? And that's what we get a chance to do, is to think about that, whether we can make a better world or whether we gain wisdom or whatever. And the other thing was, at the very end, you presented the notion that how will we know, I say, how will we know if God understands how we are questioning? How did they know? How would we know? Well, we impute that. And what I remember now is somewhere some rabbi told me, or I read, that do not pray for reward. Prayer is the reward.
Mm.
And so when we're praying and we don't have an object to pray for, it's just prayer and openness, whether it's thanks or whatever. God knows that if God is coming through everybody, at some level, there's an understanding that sit back, stay in the vestibule. The answer will be revealed if you just chill.
Nice. Thank you.
Mother knows best. That's what I got to say.
Thank you. I heard that one. Thank you. Other thoughts, reflections? That's what provoked you and interested you? Yes. Anna, did you have something?
Well, I'm thinking about Richard's saying about prayer, and you pray for something, and you say thank you for something, or how do you know? But to me, prayer is primarily relationship. It's being with God. It isn't so much asking for something, and it's not generally, maybe it may not be thanking, but it's presence with.
Yeah,
Which is, with the Ani, Anopi, Ani, theology, Anopi prayer.
yeah. So this is what this notion about questioning is, what drives people into the presence, or drives God into their presence, or them into the presence of God. Very nice. Thank you.
You said at the end, I have one more thing to say. You said at the end, when we read about Esau getting another wife, you said that, that they're in contrast with conflict. But the way I read this is Esau saw that his brother was sent to get a wife from the family tree, and he'd gone to the Canaanites to get his wife. So he actually, I see it as he was actually trying to do the right thing.
Mm.
He went to his own family, because the family tree that was close to him, he took from that family. How would he know that wasn't the right family?
Thank you.
It wasn't a stranger. He married, he corrected his mistake, but he didn't understand.
Thank you. Okay. And others? Gary?
So I'm going back to Rivka, who's dealing with the struggle in her womb. And the obvious analogy is that a lot of us have struggles within ourselves. And I started, as I was thinking of that, I thought of a comment you made a couple weeks ago, Rabbi, about if you're struggling with someone else, try to put yourself in their shoes, try to learn from their perspective.
Right.
And after reading this, now I'm realizing that I need to do that within myself to deal with that struggle that I have inside. And it's going to be a hard coordination putting myself in my own shoes, but I'm realizing that that's really what I think I need to do, is to try to come to terms with what's right and wrong, is to try to, I'm going to have to contortion myself to put myself in my own shoes, but that's what I'm gaining from this, is that, because that's the ultimate struggle.
Yeah.
Are those things internally.
Yeah.
And the struggle is to listen to yourself too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Gary, I mean, that, just to follow up a little bit more of the Mehashiloach, Rabbi Mordechai comes out of this Hasidic tradition, which revolutionized Judaism by reversing the spiritual polarity. Instead of saying our focus should be on something outside of ourselves that we call God, the Hasidic tradition said, really the battlefield is within ourselves, and which is what you've described. So it's quite beautiful. Thank you so much. Martine, you can unmute yourself, and then we'd love to hear.
Got it. I think it's what you've brought up today about Judaism being a religion of questions, of questioning, and I know we've talked about that in the past, and the Tanakh group, after going through Tanakh multiple times, we've moved on and we're doing the Jewish annotated New Testament to look at kind of the Jewish basis for Christianity. And it's been very interesting. And what just hit me tonight is that, you know, Judaism is the religion of questioning, of inquiry, of introspection, and Christianity is very much the at least reading the Gospels that we've been reading, is very much the religion of answers, of here is the answer. And I can see where that may have provided comfort for people in and maybe, you know, as I've mentioned during Torah study over the years, you know, that the Jews just wouldn't straighten up and fly right. And that's why God kept, you know, kept teaching them another lesson. And the idea of just the discomfort around not knowing. And I think that's something that's going on in society right now, is we have this discomfort around not knowing, that we're good at asking questions, but we do want to have some answers. There's some comfort in knowing. And, you know, we don't know when or if COVID's going to end. We don't know what's going to happen with the transition from administration to administration, just to name a couple. So thank you for prompting some different thinking for me tonight.
Thank you, Martine. Thank you so much. David.
I want to thank Gary for his insight. And I think Rabbi Nachman of Wroclaw taught that you have, and you, Rabbi Moskowitz, have taught in that you need to connect with the parts of you that you don't like, that aren't good, that are the evil impulse sides of you, etc., and own them. And that's what Gary's comment about the struggle inside yourself and being able to put yourself in your own shoes really reminded me of that holy challenge or charge to not isolate a part of yourself away from you as not me or not good or trying to hide it or something, but to actually connect with those things and understand them in order to understand other people and to understand yourself, in order to understand the horrible things that happen in society. I keep hearing from people saying stuff like, I can't understand how somebody could think that or do that. And they don't mean I really need to put my whole heart and effort into understanding it. They mean that's so weird, it's not even human. And I think that's connected to the parts of myself that I reject or suppress. And in order to have a heartfelt relationship with people that you disagree with, I think you have to have a heartfelt relationship with the parts of you disagree with.
Nice. I think one of the things that Torah is trying to teach us is that all these characters that we're encountering dwell within us. All these stories dwell within us. And to the extent that we deny that, then we're not uncovering some aspect of not only ourselves, but some aspect of creation, of the holiness. And so our task is to locate these characters, locate these stories inside each one of us, and try and understand and uncover them so that we can understand not only ourselves better, but all of creation better. I'd like to go ahead, Anna. You had something.
Well, the question is, Lama Zeh, Anoki, why do I exist? And this is the ultimate example of a woman being pregnant. Now, as a man, you probably haven't experienced that, right? But what do you think it feels like to have inside of you another life? It is you, you're sustaining it, came from you, but it's not you. And it's going to someday, you're going to expel it, and then, but you still nurture it. It becomes another. So Lama Zeh, this is the ultimate question. Like, what is going on? And what is this pressure? My translation just said the children pressed against each other inside her. There's no way to have twins inside you without them pressing together. And they're always going to be squirming around if they're healthy and well. And it's like, it's this theme that you have beautifully put out in light here in your Dr. Pilar, your Torah study is just right there in that first verse. How do you?
Thank you. So, okay, Susan, you can unmute Susan, and then I'll conclude. Thank you.
And just a quick comment that I love the fact that what Rebecca says isn't a prayer of petition to stop the pain. It's just why.
Yeah, why?
Yeah. So it occurred to me in the course of our study together that there's another character within the Hasidic tradition that fits so well into this image, into what we're talking about. There's a character, the maid of Ludmir, who was a woman, and she was embraced by her community as what we would today consider to be a spiritual guide for the community. But it was a very complicated, sociologically, it was very complicated because in that community, in that tradition, the idea of a woman being a public spiritual guide was beyond the norm. And the way she would publicly teach is she would sit in a doorway. She would sit in a doorway and teach Torah and answer people's questions. So she was physically representing what we're dealing with here, what this beautiful book of poetry and its graphic representation of Rachel Chada's Questions in the Vestibule, is that the maid of Ludmir sat in the doorway of the vestibule between two different worlds, between two different cultures, if you will, between a modern sensibility and an ancient sensibility, and yet she was accepted by that community because of her commitment, I guess because of her devotion, because of her wisdom, and she was able to share insights. So it's my hope and prayer for all of us that we will find a way, as the poet Rilke said to a young poet, to find a way to live the questions, because when one lives the questions rather than fighting the questions, when one lives the questions, one has some hope of eventually living into the answers. So thank you all very much for your questions, for sharing in that pathway of coming to greater insight of one another, of living the questions. Trust me, the answers will come if we can live the questions. Thank you so much. I look forward. Everyone have a wonderful Yom Chodu, a turkey day. May you find an embrace as well as nourishment, and be well, and we'll gather again after the Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you all very much.
Shabbat shalom. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Right.
You have an easy Erev Shabbat.